We're discussing lavender today, and more especially, the few things I discovered that totally changed the way mine grows. Because I made mistakes with lavender for years that I didn't even realize were mistakes, and I'm willing to bet that you're currently making at least 2 of them. Lavender grows wild across the Mediterranean on rocky hillsides with almost no soil and no irrigation. It survives drought, salt wind, shallow alkaline ground, and conditions that would kill most garden plants within weeks. It is one of the toughest plants on Earth in the right environment. So when you bring one home, give it the best potting mix you can find, water it consistently, set it in a comfortable spot on your porch, and it slowly goes gray and woody and bare at the base until it looks like something already dead. The problem is not the plant. The problem is the environment. And fixing it is simpler than you think. Almost everything that instinct tells you to do for a plant is the opposite of what lavender needs. The rich soil that helps everything else is quietly rotting its roots. The regular watering that keeps your herbs alive is stripping its fragrance and inviting fungal disease to the root zone. The hands-off approach you take in winter, leaving it alone so it can recover, is the one thing that will actually save it. Once you understand what lavender actually is and what it evolved to handle, the care that produces a dense, heavily flowering, intensely fragrant plant is not complicated. It is just different from everything else you grow. This video covers the complete system: soil, water, pruning, sun, airflow, varieties for your specific climate, a full seasonal timeline, and the harvesting window that makes the difference between dried lavender that retains its scent for a year and dried lavender that smells like nothing within a month. The soil lesson is first because it is the one that changes everything, and it is the fastest fix available. That comes right now. This is exactly what this channel publishes every single week. Plant care built on biology, not generic advice. Subscribe now so the next video finds you directly the moment it goes live. Hit that button now. Lesson 1. The soil change that fixes more problems than anything else. Lavender evolved on limestone hillsides and rocky coastal slopes across the Mediterranean basin. The soil in that native environment is shallow, mineral-rich, alkaline, and drains so completely after rain that the root zone is dry again within hours. The roots never sit in sustained moisture. They are adapted to a well-aerated, almost gravelly medium that cycles between brief, intense saturation and extended dryness. That cycle is what they are built for. Persistent dampness is what they have no defense against. Standard potting mix is engineered to hold moisture. That is exactly its job for the tropical and subtropical plants most people grow. For lavender roots, it creates a sustained wet environment that those roots were never equipped to handle. The fungal pathogens that cause root rot thrive in consistently moist soil. Lavender roots have no evolved resistance to them because in their natural habitat, those conditions almost never occur. The roots decay from the outside in, nutrient uptake collapses, the foliage goes gray and loses its fragrance, and the plant dies slowly from the ground up while the owner keeps watering it, making the underlying problem worse with every application. The fix is immediate and costs almost nothing. Mix standard potting soil with at least 30% perlite, coarse horticultural sand, or fine gravel before planting. Some experienced lavender growers use a mix that is 70% mineral material and only 30% organic potting soil. The correct texture feels almost aggressively gritty. Water poured on should run through and out the drainage holes within seconds, not pool on the surface and soak in gradually. In the ground, amend clay or rich garden soil with sharp sand and gravel before planting. If water sits on the surface for more than a few seconds after pouring, the mix is still too heavy. This single adjustment fixes more lavender problems than any other change you can make, and the plant responds within weeks. Lesson 2. Water less than feels right. Significantly less. Once lavender is established in the ground, it needs supplemental watering only during genuine extended drought. A deep soak once every 2 to 3 weeks at most, and only when the soil has been completely dry for an extended period. In a container, water only when the soil is dry 2 to 3 inches down. Push a finger into the mix. Any moisture at all means wait. The instinct to water when a plant looks slightly stressed is exactly the wrong response with lavender. That stress response is what the plant was built to handle. Intervening with water at that point is removing a condition it evolved to thrive under. Here is the part that most people never hear. Overwatering lavender does not just threaten the root system. It actively reduces the concentration of the aromatic compounds that give lavender its fragrance. Commercial lavender oil production research has consistently documented that plants grown under mild controlled drought produce significantly higher concentrations of linalool and linaloyl acetate, the two primary fragrance compounds in lavender, than plants receiving regular irrigation. The plant produces more aromatic oil when it is operating under water stress. Comfort suppresses fragrance. Mild thirst intensifies it. This is why lavender grown on the dry hillsides of Provence smells more intensely than lavender grown in a well-irrigated American garden with similar sun exposure. It is not the variety or the soil chemistry alone. It is the water regime. The stress is the signal the plant uses to ramp up oil production. Water less and your lavender will not just survive better, it will smell stronger. Lesson 3 is the pruning rule that prevents the #1 reason lavender looks dead before it actually is. And lesson 5 is about varieties, because choosing the wrong type for your climate is a mistake that better care cannot fix. Both coming up now. If you are not subscribed yet, hit that button now. Practical plant care built on real biology every single week. Subscribe so the next video reaches you directly. Lesson 3. The pruning rule that no other shrub follows. Lavender develops on a woody base. Every growing season, the lower portions of the stems harden progressively into wood, while new soft growth emerges from the top. Without consistent pruning, the plant becomes taller on an increasingly bare woody skeleton. The green growth retreats to the stem tips, and within a few years, the plant looks like a collection of sticks with small tufts at the top, still technically alive but producing very little bloom and looking nothing like a healthy lavender should. The rule that changes this is absolute and has no exceptions. Never cut into the woody section. Lavender cannot regenerate from old hardened wood. If a stem is cut below the point where active green growth exists, that stem produces nothing further. It is done. This is fundamentally different from most woody shrubs, which can be cut to the ground and push new growth from the base. Lavender cannot do that. Once wood is wood, the regenerative capacity is gone. The correct technique is to prune only into the soft green growth, approximately 1/3 down from the top of the plant, shaping the entire crown into a rounded mound rather than cutting individual stems. Do this twice annually. First in early spring after the last frost risk has passed and new green growth is visibly emerging from the base. This is the confirmation that the plant survived winter and the timing signal for the first cut. Second in late summer after the primary bloom cycle finishes. Each pruning stimulates lateral branching, which keeps the plant dense, compact, and heavily productive. A lavender that is pruned on this schedule from its first season will maintain a tight rounded form, producing abundant flowers for 10 to 15 years. A lavender that goes unpruned for 3 or 4 years can sometimes be rescued through gradual renovation, cutting back 1/3 of the oldest, woodiest stems per year across 3 consecutive seasons. But not every plant recovers, and prevention is substantially easier than rescue. Lesson 4. Sunlight is not optional, and partial is not enough. Lavender requires a minimum of 6 to 8 hours of full direct sunlight per day. Not bright indirect light, not dappled shade under a tree. Direct unobstructed sun on the foliage for 6 to 8 hours. This is the second most common reason lavender fails to bloom, and it is one of the most consistently underestimated requirements in home gardening. Spots that feel bright to the human eye frequently deliver only 2 to 3 hours of actual direct sun. For lavender, that is insufficient for robust flower production. Place lavender in the most sun-exposed location available. Against a south-facing wall or fence is the ideal position. The wall surface absorbs heat during the day and radiates it back at night, creating a warmer microclimate that lavender actively benefits from. In containers, move the pot to follow the sun rather than accepting whatever sun a fixed position receives. Lavender that receives adequate direct sun produces more flowers, tighter growth, and more concentrated fragrance than the same variety growing in insufficient light. And no amount of improved soil or adjusted watering compensates for a location that simply does not deliver enough sun. Lesson 5. Air movement is what keeps it disease-free. Lavender on Mediterranean hillsides grows in environments where wind moves through the foliage consistently. That constant air movement performs two functions. It keeps humidity low around the leaf surface and stem base, preventing the gray mold, powdery mildew, and crown rot that appear in still humid conditions. And it dries the soil surface and the crown area rapidly after rain, reducing the window in which moisture can sit against the plant's most vulnerable tissue. In a crowded garden bed, or in a still indoor environment, moisture lingers. The conditions that trigger fungal disease develop at the crown, the junction between the root system and the above-ground stems, which is the least visible and most critical part of the plant. By the time crown rot is visible in the foliage, it has usually been developing underground for weeks. Space lavender plants a minimum of 2 to 3 feet apart outdoors to allow air circulation through and between them. Indoors, position the plant near a window that opens regularly or run a small fan nearby on low. The airflow requirement is not about wind speed, it is about preventing the stagnant humid microclimate that turns into disease. Lesson 6. Choosing the wrong variety is a mistake care cannot fix. English lavender, Lavandula angustifolia, is the most cold-hardy species and the benchmark for fragrance. It survives winters across zones 5 through 9, produces the most intensely aromatic flowers, and is the species used in essential oil production globally. If you live anywhere in the continental United States outside the deep south or extreme desert southwest, English lavender is the starting point. Hidcote produces deep purple compact flowers on a tightly mounded plant, ideal for containers and formal borders. Munstead is slightly more compact, reliably early blooming, and performs exceptionally in smaller spaces. French lavender, Lavandula dentata, has serrated gray-green leaves and blooms almost continuously in mild climates, but it cannot survive hard freezing winters. It is appropriate for zones 8 through 11, coastal California, the Gulf Coast, the mild winter Southwest, beautiful and productive in the right climate. Dead by March anywhere that gets genuine frost. Spanish lavender, Lavandula stoachas, is the most visually dramatic species with distinctive petal flags rising from the top of each flower head. It is warm climate only, zones 7 through 10, and it is the most humidity sensitive of the common species. In the humid southeast, it struggles even when temperatures are within its stated range. The combination of heat and humidity that characterizes that region exceeds what Spanish lavender handles well, regardless of how well everything else is managed. Lavandin, Lavandula exintermedia, is a hybrid that produces the largest plants, the most abundant flower spikes, and the highest essential oil yield of any lavender type. Provence, Grosso, and Phenomenal are the most widely grown cultivars. Lavandin is more heat-tolerant than pure English lavender and is the species responsible for the iconic purple field landscapes of Provence and other commercial lavender regions. Phenomenal specifically was bred for humidity tolerance, making it the strongest performer for gardeners in the mid-Atlantic states and the upper South, where summer humidity would stress other varieties. If you are in that region and have struggled to establish lavender that persists through multiple seasons, Phenomenal is the variety to try before concluding that lavender is impossible in your location. If the variety section just explained a lavender that died despite good care, wrong species for your climate, wrong zone, wrong humidity tolerance, subscribe now. This is what this channel covers every week. Subscribe so the next video finds you directly. The complete seasonal care timeline. Early spring. Once the last frost risk has passed and new green growth is visibly pushing from the base of the plant, make the first annual pruning cut. Shape the entire plant into a rounded mound, cutting 1/3 off the top of the green growth only, never into the woody base. Remove any stems that did not survive winter. Identify them by scratching the bark lightly with a fingernail. Gray-brown tissue underneath means that stem is dead and can be removed at the base. If you are going to fertilize at all, this is the one appropriate window. A very light application of a low-nitrogen fertilizer. Lavender does not need feeding, and overfeeding produces lush, soft growth that is more disease-susceptible than the lean, firm growth a nutrient-poor environment produces. If in doubt, skip it. Late spring through summer. This is largely a hands-off period. Water only when the soil is completely dry at depth. As flower spikes finish blooming, deadhead them by cutting back to the first set of leaves below the spent flower. This keeps the plant looking clean and in some varieties encourages a secondary bloom flush. Harvest flowers for drying when approximately half the buds on a spike have opened. That is the moment when essential oil concentration peaks inside the bud tissue. Waiting until the spike is fully open means the most volatile fragrance compounds have already begun evaporating into the air around you. Beautiful for the garden experience. Not ideal for dried lavender that needs to retain its scent. Late summer. After the main bloom finishes, make the second annual pruning cut using the same technique. 1/3 off the green growth, rounded mound shape. This is also the most productive moment for taking cuttings. Every stem removed during this pruning is a potential new plant. Take 4-inch cuttings from stems that are semi-hardwood, slightly woody and firm at the base but still green and flexible at the tip. Strip the lower leaves, leaving a clean bare stem at the bottom. Press the stripped end into damp perlite or a 50-50 mix of perlite and coarse sand. Keep in bright indirect light and mist lightly every few days. Roots form in 4 to 6 weeks. One established plant can produce 10 or more rooted cuttings from a single late summer pruning without being harmed. Fall. Stop supplemental watering entirely. Lavender going into dormancy benefits from dry conditions. The drier the plant enters winter, the better it tolerates cold. In zones 5 and 6, a light layer of coarse gravel mulch around the crown, not bark mulch, which retains moisture against the crown, insulates against freeze-thaw cycles that can heave roots and split the crown tissue. Do not attempt to tidy the plant in fall. Leave the stems. Winter. Leave it completely alone. The dead-looking gray stems above the woody base are actively protecting the dormant growth points inside. Cutting them removes that protection and exposes the crown to cold damage at the moment it is most vulnerable. Wait. Do nothing. The signal that winter is over for a lavender plant is not the calendar date. It is the appearance of new green growth at the base. That is when you pick up the pruners. Not before. Harvesting for fragrance that lasts. The timing of lavender harvest determines how long the dried flowers retain their scent. Cut too late and the most volatile aromatic compounds have already dissipated from the buds. The correct window is when approximately half the buds on a flower spike have opened and the other half are still closed. At that stage, the essential oil concentration inside the unopened buds is at its highest point. Once the spike is fully open, the fragrance compounds, which are volatile by definition, have been releasing into the air continuously and a meaningful percentage is already gone. Cut stems long, 8 to 10 inches at minimum. Bundle 5 to 10 stems together, secure the bundle at the base with a rubber band or twine, and hang the bundles upside down in a dark, dry, well-ventilated location. A covered porch, a dry basement, or an interior closet with airflow all work. Direct sunlight fades the color of the dried flowers and accelerates degradation of the oils. Darkness preserves both. In 1 to 2 weeks, the flowers will be fully dry and the fragrance will be concentrated and stable. Stored in an airtight container, away from light and heat, well-harvested dried lavender holds its scent for a year or longer. Dried lavender that smells like almost nothing within 2 months was almost always harvested from fully open spikes or dried in conditions with too much light and warmth. What changes when you stop helping it? Everything described in this video points toward the same principle. Lavender does not need your help in the way most garden plants do. It needs conditions: lean, gritty soil that drains in seconds, direct sun for 6 to 8 hours, air movement around the foliage and crown, infrequent deep watering that allows complete drying between applications, twice annual pruning that never touches woody tissue, and a variety selected for the actual climate it is living in. Give it those conditions and largely leave it alone. The plant has been managing itself on Mediterranean hillsides for thousands of years without assistance. Your role is to recreate those conditions as closely as possible and then stop intervening. The lavender that looks difficult to grow is almost always lavender being cared for too generously. Too much water, too much rich soil, too much protection from the stress it evolved to thrive under. Back off on every input, and the plant that was slowly declining begins to strengthen. The first 2 years require the most active management, correct soil from the start, twice annual pruning established as a habit, watering discipline built into the routine. After that, lavender rewards patience with a compound return. The plant gets larger, more fragrant, and more productive each season, while requiring less attention than it did the year before. Tell me in the comments what your biggest lavender struggle has been. Gray foliage, no flowers, the plant going woody and bare at the base, winter loss, or something specific to your climate. The challenge you describe is almost certainly shared by someone reading the comments right now, and your experience, what you tried and what happened, might be the piece that finally makes their lavender work. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. If this video changed how you understand lavender care, that is exactly what this channel publishes every single week. Plant care built on biology rather than generic advice. Subscribe now so the next video reaches you the moment it goes live. Hit that button now.